We are back in the shop, and today we've got some more Jag content for you. So the Vanden Plas is back in the shop, and today it's kind of an uncommon issue that we are going to be tackling, and admittedly, I have been avoiding for quite some time because it's a big job for a small part. But let me tell you what's going on. So for those who remember, when I purchased the car as a non-runner, it basically, was not working. There was all sorts of issues going on. The air suspension was laid out. It was extremely grumpy. And we have been systematically going through the car and getting it back to its former glory. Well, one issue that has presented itself since I purchased the car was the electronic parking brake did not work. And for any of my X350 owners that have encountered this before, you know exactly what that means. With that not working, not only does your cruise control not work, there's an annoying chime that just continues to beep as soon as you go over 10 miles an hour, and it obviously ruins the experience of the car. And with my ownership, I'm gonna be honest with you guys, what I did, I went in the trunk and I disconnected the parking brake module. And what this did is basically stopped the chime, but obviously I still had no parking brake working and no cruise control. And today we're going to resolve that. And for me, here's the part in question. My electronic parking brake motor is broken. And actually, I think it's inside here, the gearbox gear drive assembly. I think something's broken. When you actuate it, there's this really bad clicking mechanical sound. You can kind of see the brake cables on the calipers judder, but nothing happens. And so we need to replace this. Unfortunately, on the X350 and probably some other Jags that use this same setup, this is buried in the rear suspension. And I'll show you exactly where it is here in a couple minutes. For those of you that are as lucky as me and have to deal with this, I have seen some people do this repair with some kind of shade tree approaches. I'm gonna show you how to replace this the right way. It is a big job, and honestly, I've had to get some specialty tools to make my life a little bit easier, as I will be doing this on my own. But I do wanna show you that you can do this, but it is quite a lot of work for a small part. And like I said, the reason I have been avoiding it as long as I have. But let's jump over to the car and let me show you step one that you have to do before getting started. And that's gonna be with our trusty diagnostic tool. So I've actually already run this process, but I'll jump you back to the screen and show you what you need to run so that you can get the parking brake in a position to be removed. And that's gonna be the electronic parking brake release to service position process. So basically what that'll do, depending on how yours has failed, it will set everything to a release status, making the cables not tight, releasing the parking brake if it's on, and then you will be able to do this service much, much easier. With that complete, let's start the process of tearing into the car to get to this parking brake module motor assembly. And equally, I will show you kind of how we have to go through this entire process. So I'm gonna raise the car up a little bit here, get the wheels off the ground, and then we can get on with it. Step one, let's get this wheel off. All right, so with the wheel off, next up, we can get this brake caliper off. Part of this process though is going to be releasing the parking brake cable, which we've already set from the computer into kind of the service mode. So we're gonna get that off. And then the other piece, and I'll kind of get in here a little closer in a minute, the brake line actually goes through the upper control arm, and kind of part of our job that will be in the way doing that. So we're gonna disconnect the brake hose, pull it up through the upper control arm, and then hook it back up to the caliper. So kind of lurking back here, we have the two caliper bolts from one of my earlier videos where we did the back rotors. You'll know kind of where that is, but undo this one like so. Let's get the lower one. All right, there we go. So we're loose. There we go. Second one. Now we should be able to kind of wiggle this off like so. So this right here is the parking brake cable. It is, like I said, in the service mode, which means that there's not tension on it. You can actually see I just was able to move it, which is great. What I've found is, you need to actuate the arms still here. But by articulating it like so, you can kind of get it to a point where the cable will just pop off. A bit more. I think it just wants to fight tonight. That's all the way. There we go. The next piece I recommend doing, if you guys can see again, is the little sleeve here, and that allows us to get the cable out. There she goes. I'll show you guys the little tabs on this once I get it out. But parking brake disconnected. All right, so next we're gonna undo the brake line. Watch out because there's a crush washer here and one underneath. So we don't want to lose those because we will certainly have a leak. There we go. See, I did that last time. Next up, this guy's got to come up like so. Put that washer back on. And yes, we will have to bleed the brakes, but at least we're not using a ton of fluid doing this. All right, so next up, we have to disconnect the lower shock bolt, this guy right here. Okay, let's start with a breaker bar in this because it's done up tight. There she goes. There she goes. And now I've got the car up in the air. Let me show you where that parking brake motor and actuator are located, and you'll start to get the idea of what we're trying to accomplish so we can access it and replace it properly. So here you find us, the underneath of an X350, something a lot of you probably don't get to see very often. But really, when we come under here, if we spin around, here's the differential right here. Obviously the exhaust going out to the back boxes. It is extremely hard to see. I think this is the best way to show you guys. So this right here, these two cables are basically parking brake cables. And you can see this one disappears behind the differential and the rear subframe. And then to the right over here is our basically spare wheel well in the trunk. And if I can get a little closer, when I say hard to see, I really mean it. The circular thing is the rear differential mount, and above it, that silver cable is the parking brake cable. And basically sitting on top of the subframe at the back of the diff is where this motor is, and it is completely inaccessible when it's basically all put together like this. And so this is what we're working towards to get access to. So this might start to give you guys an idea why I've been avoiding this job, but in the end, we got to get it done. So I think for me, next step, I got to get these rear back boxes off because those basically come underneath the subframe, and you guys might have guessed it. We have to lower the entire rear subframe in order to get to this. So that's what we're gonna be doing today. But yeah, next step, we're gonna get the rear mufflers off. And to give you an idea, here's the back box, the pipe. And as we come up here, just kind of where the front of the diff is, these are where it's clamped. So we're gonna get these clamps undone. We have to get it off the hangers. And there's, I believe, a hanger somewhere, yeah, just up here. There she is. We gotta get that undone. and then we can get this exhaust section out of the way. I think that's pretty straightforward. I will maybe do a time lapse for you guys. We'll see how well it treats me. As this exhaust has been on here for 15 years, it might be a little bit of a bear. So depending how it goes, you'll find me back here once these are removed. We are back under the car and we have the back boxes out. These actually came out pretty easy. It didn't take too long, but you can see obviously plenty of space in the back, although that's not really where we're working. But most importantly, under here, we now have the clearance. I did also, just something to keep in mind, I'll do the 3 bolts here and then right here as well. So I think that gives us good clearance. Basically, when we do undo the subframe bolt here and here, this thing will come out the way, which I guess is all part of the process. So really where we're at now, we have to undo the differential from the drive shaft. This, I believe, is a 15 mil, and then there's an 18 mil nut in there. I think the best thing to do, I'm gonna kind of show you guys this before I start, but basically you can get the 18 mil socket in through the back here and undo it that way. That's gonna be the most effective. Here's a better angle. But yeah, you can get the 18 mil in through the back here and undo everything. It looks like there's 3 bolts that you have to undo, and then the drive shaft will be able to be separated as we lower the subframe. So overall, so far so good. I'm gonna work on getting this differential undone. And then I think we're getting really, really close. The one thing that I do know needs to be addressed is the fuel filler neck. I think I pointed that out, but if not, we'll jump over there and take a look at it, kind of where it goes through the subframe and what we need to do to disconnect it. But I think we're getting relatively close to starting to drop the subframe, which is great. If you can get your 18 right here, and I think I used a little bit of persuasion like this. It's probably not the best going into the transmission, but it kind of freed up the nut. And I believe we got a little washer. Yeah, there she goes. It's out. I've got one more of these to do. This one's out. We're gonna work on that. I think we're down to the fuel filler hose and then anything I've forgotten. All right, guys, update time. Let's take a look under the car and show you where we're at. So here we are with the drive shaft. You can kind of see I've actually pried this out, just the little collar here that seats into the differential. I just did this so that when we lower the subframe, it doesn't bind up. I did put the car in neutral so I could rotate the drive shaft around to get the 3 bolts out. So just a tip there. When you put it in neutral though, the car is gonna be on. So basically, just keep that in mind. Once I was done, I kind of put it back in park. Nonetheless, this is done, and I'm pretty hopeful as this comes down, it will just separate. Something I just did off camera, I saw these up here. They mount to these little clips. These, I believe, are the main harness plugs that basically plug into all the electrics that sit on the subframe. So I'm hopeful that with these unplugged, when we lower the subframe down, even though there's some wiring on there, it'll all just come away with the subframe. And lastly, if I can get this to focus for you, here we go. That's our fuel filler neck hose. You can see this is undone. And honestly, it's moving. And equally, if we follow it up and then we cut over, we can see the other clamp here. And if we come up, this is free too. And honestly, if I kind of get my hand on this side, we can see it's free. My idea here, because you can kind of see it does go through the subframe, is to start the lowering process and then start kind of yanking on this thing to remove it from whichever side decides it's going to behave. And from what I can tell, that is about it. We need to basically lower the car down and get everything prepared to undo the 4 subframe bolts. And then we need to see if we can separate this thing from the actual car. And just to show you the subframe bolts, here's one of them. As you can see, I have marked some paint. I'm gonna do a little bit more on each of them just to make sure it's really clear where this came from, because this has adjustability. And if you're way off, you're gonna screw up your alignment. I'm just trying to get, in our 90th percentile here without all the factory tools and jigs. But my goal is to probably mark right where the bushing is pressing up on the body here and put a nice white line between everything so that we can get this exactly in the same place when it goes back in. Moving forward, we have the same thing going on here. Another subframe bolt. I did mark up here somewhere, but I'm gonna do a little bit more just to be really clear. And then obviously we have the same going on the other side. And likely the tool that's gonna steal the show, this is what I've been waiting for. I got myself a hydraulic table. This thing can lift to about 4 feet. So my goal here is to start this thing off about as high as it can go. That way I can still get underneath the car. We can undo those subframe bolts and then very slowly start raising the car up, and hopefully the subframe stays here on the table, and that way I can do this job on my own. So with that, I'm gonna get under the car. I'm gonna mark around the subframe a little bit more to make sure that we keep that alignment as close as possible. And then we're gonna get this hydraulic table underneath the car, get everything in place, and I guess we gotta start removing those subframe bolts and see what happens. So let's get to it. All right, guys, well, here it is. That is at its maximum lift height. As you can see, I'm going kind of widthways on this. Reason being, it sits real nice kind of on the subframe itself. We're not quite there on this side. This is honestly just because my lift is a little out of adjustment, but that is okay. And then, yeah, when we come around here, you'll see our subframe is already sitting on the platform. So there's no avoiding it. I have to undo these subframe bolts, and then let's see if we can slowly but surely lower the subframe down a bit on the table, and then once we're done, we'll raise the car up as well. So let's get to it. All right, guys, well, quick progress update. Here we have it. We are probably 6 or 8 inches lower right now. So far, things are coming down pretty well. Yeah, you can see the top of the subframe, which is good. I've got the fuel filler neck hose off. That's what the green rag is. I just kind of stuffed that in there for now. We'll see what we can do to seal that up just to keep the fumes at bay. But you can see we are on our way down. So really, next steps here, we're just gonna keep lowering the subframe down to where we can get to a point where it is not only stable on the table, but I can access the parking brake motor mechanism assembly, and we can focus on getting that thing removed. So we're just gonna keep working on this, probably lower this down a little bit more, maybe a foot or so, and then let's see if we can get the car all the way up and out of the way. All right, guys, well, mission accomplished. We have the subframe separated from the car. It was not too bad. I did find a couple little things that hung up the subframe as I was dropping it down. So let's jump over there, take a look at what those were so they don't give you a hard time, and then I'll show you the subframe and the next steps that we'll be working on. So here we are, and as you can see, there is no subframe. The fuel filler neck hose, it did get a little snagged up for me. It was not too bad. I was able to basically just kind of push it through the subframe and then lower it down a bit more and just slowly work it out. So not too bad, but something to look out for because it was getting snagged up. I will also show you the hole in the subframe that it feeds through as well. There was also one extra electrical connection, and that was this guy up here. I believe this is for my fuel pump. So as I dropped the subframe, I noticed a piece of harness that was kind of poking up like this, and so we unplugged that as well. But to be honest, those were the only two things to get kind of caught up on the lowering process. So it did not go too bad. But as you can see, the subframe is there on our table. Let's go over here and take a look at it. This is the plug for the fuel pump. This is the one that I noticed starting to get pulled up like this. So we got it unplugged. And right here, this is where the fuel filler neck hose runs through. So as this started going down, the hose was just kind of getting jammed up in here and I had to kind of push it through. But once it was through, there was no problem. And maybe we start by looking at this from a distance. You can kind of see this is quite the assembly that we just dropped down. And as we get closer, right here is our problem child. So you guys may remember when we were looking up from underneath, we could not even see this. Now you see why. It is sitting basically right on top of the back of the differential. Extremely hard to access. I've seen people cut holes in their trunk to do this to avoid dropping the subframe. Definitely understand why if you do not have the lift or a table like this. But as I said, we are doing this the right way. So for us, next step, we need to get this thing removed and then we can work on the reassembly. All right, guys, well, e-brake is off. It was a little tricky disconnecting this cable. Real quick, something to consider. These little pins right here, they basically stop the cable from being able to move inwards once it's clipped in place. So you have to bend that down, and then basically, as you probably saw in the video, this thing will slide forward and come out. So it was a little fiddly for me to figure that out. But basically, we have a rear subframe removed, the electric parking brake motor off. And then when we come over here, we have my old one right here and the replacement right here. I thought it would be interesting. We can throw this on the bench and open it up and see what's going on inside, see if it's actually broken or if something's just jammed up. Nonetheless, I'm gonna put this new one on and let's start getting this thing reassembled. So total time to get me to this point, I would say this probably took me about 3 or 4 hours to get the subframe down. Admittedly, I have never done this before, so it is a first for me, and there were a few things that took me some time to figure out what was going on. But nonetheless, it is a big job for quite a simple part replacement. Anyway, with that, let's get this new part, see if we can get it bolted on the subframe, waste no time, and start putting this car back together. All right, folks, well, we have the new electric parking brake motor on. It is simply these two 10mm bolts. I think you saw me remove those getting the old one off, but you just bolt it on like so. No worries there. And then electrical harness, very simple, it plugs in over here. Just one thing to keep in mind, it does tuck under the cable and then it kind of tucks back up and plugs in. I think you want to make sure you do this in a factory location like this because there's not much room above here and you certainly don't want to pinch it against the floor pan. And equally, you have to be conscious of the axle. So this is in the actual cable coming off of the e-brake right here. It tucks down underneath, and then as we come under the cradle, You can see it right here. It loops around. And then as we tuck down here, here it is clipped in. This clip, it's a little fiddly to kind of pry out, but it is doable. I just used a little screwdriver behind the back and just kind of worked it out carefully. And then you can just press it back in. I did end up just tapping it very gently with a hammer just to seat it in there nicely, but it's rock solid now. You can see here too at the back, it's a little cramped, but this is one side parking brake cable. It's attached here. If we come around this side, it kind of shows you, it just slots in right here. Follow the cable across, and here is the little union that we had to undo before. And you can see I've pressed the little tab back down now, and the parking brake cable is slotted back in here. And that means it's time for reassembly. So next up, we are gonna get the car a little bit lower down. We are gonna raise the whole subframe back up, and we are gonna mate it back to the car. Obviously, this is just kind of a reverse of what we've already done. However, I will kind of pause along the way for anything that seems to be a blocker, anything that seems a little tricky, just kind of point it out to you guys. But next time you meet me back here, we should have the cradle bolted back up under the car, and we'll be one step closer to having a functioning parking brake. So let's get to it. All right, guys, well, I wanted to update you on the progress of the Van Pla because I know I've been promising a video coming out, and unfortunately, I ran into a little bit of a snag when doing the parking brake. So let me tell you what's going on. And as you guys saw, when I was removing the cradle, I had to disconnect the brake lines and snake those back through the upper rear control arms to get them out of the way so we could drop the cradle down. So ran into a little issue when we were putting it all back together. Once I got the brake lines through and hooked everything back up and started the process on bleeding the brakes, for whatever reason, I noticed that I had a leak coming from the boot on both of the rear calipers. And this is a problem. I don't really know why this was happening. Obviously the car is getting a little bit old now, so fundamentally a seal has failed, but I was not okay with putting it back together like that. So that brings me to today. What I've done, I got those parts on order from Rock Auto, so they should be here super soon. We are gonna put brand new rebuilt calipers on both sides, so all the seals are good. We are gonna bleed the brakes again, and then we're gonna get the car back on the ground. So you've heard me say this before on the channel. Unfortunately, sometimes I am at the mercy of waiting on parts, especially when surprises like this crop up. So this is why it's taking me a little bit longer than anticipated to get this video out. But you'll find me back here in a little bit. We'll have those new calipers on the car and we can finish up this project. So while we wait on these calipers to come in, no better time than now to open up this old parking brake motor, see what the heck happened and why it failed. So let's get to it. So from what I can see, we got these 10mm bolts. So let's start with those. Okay. Let's see if it'll separate like this. Oh, there we go. Well, that was pretty easy. So, not much going on in here. I guess maybe unsurprising, but nothing really broken from what I can tell. 8mm bolts. Here's one. Let's do the other. Okay. So we have a gear. Aha. I don't know if this is the complete cause. Oh, some oil that came out. But we can see here, there's some broken metal. And this almost looks like seems magnetic, which is interesting. But yeah, this was broken inside. So you can kind of see where it's missing from the gear. And then this is the main drive gear. So seems quite simple. The motor itself worked fine. Yeah, and then let's see what's going on this side. Yeah, no real damage here. So maybe repairable with the right parts. I'm not exactly sure. Not the carnage I expected to see. I thought we'd have a completely stripped out gear here. Yeah, the only real issue is this magnet. Well, that was a little anticlimactic. I thought there'd be a little bit more going on in there than what we found. I have a suspicion though that little broken piece of metal was what was jamming us up and basically why the motor would just kind of rattle back and forth. It kind of was behaving like gears were not engaging properly. So nonetheless, I'm glad we put the new one on. And let's jump over to the new brakes. We can take a look at those. I've got those on the car now, so you can kind of see where I'm at and how the car's behaving. And here she is in the shop and on the ground. Admittedly, there's quite a lot going on behind the scenes here in the shop, so it's a little cozy in here, but brand new brake rotors are installed, nice and shiny, and most importantly, not leaking. And that was an entire week delay waiting on these to come in, but trying to source these locally, it's crazy expensive and hard to find. So that's what we were left with. But I am super thrilled to say they are back on the car. Let's jump back in the car and show you what's going on in there. All right, well, let's start this thing up. And you know, it wouldn't be a Jag unless you had a check engine light on. Still working on that one. And the bonnet open, that's a fun one too. I have a faulty switch on my hood latch, so it seems to think the hood's open from time to time. But most importantly, down here in the bottom left, I have never had the brake light on until I just did this repair. And equally, if I put it in reverse, parking sensors are going a little crazy, but it goes off. If we keep our eye back here, I'm going to start the car up and actuate the parking brake so you can see it moving on its own. Now, that should have released the brake. And now if I put it back in park, and I'll shut the car off, parking brake should now be back on. So there you have it, folks. What a mission to repair the broken electric parking brake, but it is absolutely worth it. More than anything, I want everything to work on the car as it left the factory, but more so, no more pesky chime that I have bypassed by removing the parking brake module, and most importantly, I now have my cruise control back as well. But as you guys saw, there's no shortage of lights still on the dash for me to troubleshoot and see what's going on with the car, but we are making it one step closer to being a fully sorted X358. And if you are new to the channel and came this way because of this beautiful X358, you're in luck. There's plenty more content on this coming your way. I've got all sorts of little projects to get this thing perfect. So plenty more content on that. Behind here, the longtime lurker 928S4. Parts are on the way. I've already done some filming on this, but I want a nice comprehensive video to get this kick-started. And then I've got all the other cars that are usually in the shop that I have tons of content coming on as well. But if I do a quick turnaround, you may see things are a little different behind me right now as we are doing some major shop updates that I'm also filming and going to share with you guys very soon. So please hit that subscribe button. It really, really helps me out. As you can see, I am inching closer to 10,000 subscribers, and that is a huge milestone for the channel, which I cannot accomplish without your support. So hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, drop me a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are on doing this job on the XJ. Like I said, it was quite a big job, but it is so rewarding to have one more thing fixed on the car. And with that, I will see all you guys on the next episode.